No weird stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're going that.
Unless you make it weird.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for this Friday Night Live. My name is Evan Collene. If you haven't heard of me before, I'm one of the instructors here at Watts Atelier, and very excited to be with you tonight. I'm just going to go through a few of my just drawings that I have in the pad right now before I get started here. But we'll be doing a long figure drawing, so somewhere in the realm of like 2.5 hours really in the end when it comes to the breaks, because the classes here we have are about 3 hours long. But you know, this is just a demo I did earlier this week for head drawing class, figure demo. See if I have some more finished stuff in here. Figure drawing from a little while back. Some quick sketch. Another figure drawing, and you know, most of these figure drawings are about 3 hours, and so I'm probably going to be aiming for something in this realm of finish, essentially, because you know, you only have so much time, so you kind of have to choose what you're going to do with it. But we can get into pose if you're ready. It's cool. Maybe we could just turn your whole body a little bit that way. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's nice. Cool. So when starting off with a figure drawing like this, usually what I like to do is just count out my head sizes. So I'll just, you know, measure with the tip of my pencil and with my thumb, and hold it up to the model. Count 1 head size, 2, 3, 4. 5.5 or 6 heads tall. Measure this out on the page. Something right around there, maybe a little bit bigger. And I'll just try to start very simply, just really looking to get my basic overall proportions and think about those very basic, simple shapes. Just finding my head shape here, looking for the gesture of that neck. Look for an angle across the shoulders. A lot of times, I like to just look for that sort of pillow shape that the torso makes. Find that basic shape of the arm that's coming in front of the torso here. Pull a plumb line. Check where that leg is sitting. And really just trying to make sure I'm thinking more about the basic shapes than anything else. I still am thinking about the overall gesture and movement of the pose and somewhat of how I want to compose the whole thing, but really just keeping it simple at this point. Looking at that negative shape in between the legs here. So in some sense, even though this is very simple, this is essentially my first pass, because I just want to make sure that everything sort of fits on the page and make sure that I'm just in the right spot, in the ballpark essentially, for everything else. So oftentimes on the online you'll hear that go from head, neck, shoulders, crotch, ground, and that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm just kind of, started with that basic head shape, continued down the figure, keeping it very simple at this point. Just lighten it a little bit with my hand. Then I'll go back up to that head. Or I should say just up to the shoulders right now. I'm just going to work out a little bit of that structure in sort of a simple, lighter way at this point. Looking for that flow, making sure I'm not losing it, and if anything, I want to exaggerate it a little bit more than what I'm actually seeing up there. Find that rhythm for the pecs. Find a little bit of that lat and sort of how this rib cage sits in here. Finding where that oblique sits on the hip here. Sort of find that rhythmical connection here of the abdomen if we want to. Checking another plumb line to make sure I have that knee in the right spot. And really, I'm just not committing to any of these lines yet, just keeping it very light, keeping it simple. I'm going to check a plumb line to find exactly where that wrist sits. Just going to draw a straight line from that elbow down to that bone on the pinky side. It's all that ulna. Just going to pull those flexors off of the bottom. Find that basic shape of the hand. Checking a horizontal line to make sure that hand is sitting in the right spot as we get down to this knee. Getting some good foreshortening on this left leg here. So I'm going to really make sure I get that proportional shape first so I don't make it too long. It's really easy to sort of elongate limbs that are foreshortened because we just think they should look longer. You have to make sure that we're objective about it. Again, just rubbing my hand over it. I'm just really trying to keep this first layer very light, very simple at this stage. So now that I have more of that figure worked out, I can go back up to that head and have a little bit more confidence in putting it in accurately. But I'll still keep it on the more simple side as of right now, just because things are sort of moving around and I haven't really set a hard anchor for this drawing yet. So I would pretty much call that the end of my sort of second pass. It's not maybe as exact as I would make it sometimes, but I kind of want to go in with a little bit more of a tonal approach. Not 100%. You know, if I was going in 100% for sort of just tonal approach, I wouldn't have really done much of this. I probably only would have done that first pass where I just go in with the very basic shapes. But if you do something like this, it'll give you a little bit more to work with, a little bit, make it a little bit easier on you to work out these shapes. But essentially what I'll do is I'll squint down and I'll just start to discern the shapes I'm seeing, trying to keep them very simple and sort of discerning between light and shadow.
We do have some questions and comments coming in.
Sure, yeah, you can go for it.
All right, so somebody says, I find having the board at my knees at an angle throws off my proportions. I guess it just makes me really have to think about the drawing.
Yeah, I would basically just say, as long as you're not at too much of an angle, you'll pretty much be fine. I mean, even in this situation, right now, this board isn't actually on my knees. It's on this drawing horse, so it's a little bit more at an angle than what I usually like it to be, but I just have to stand up more and sort of make sure I'm looking at the drawing straight on. And as long as you're sort of aware of it, for the most part, it shouldn't be too much of a problem.
Somebody else asks, let's see.
Hi, Evan. Have you trained anywhere else besides Watts Atelier?
Not really. I have not really trained anywhere else. I mean, I have some like instructional videos from other places, from people I kind of wanted to learn from. Like there's some really good Nathan Fowkes stuff out there. And but no, I have not actually trained anywhere else. Just originally started with the online, probably like somewhere around 8 years ago. And then yeah, eventually came out here and studied in person. So I should say as well, I'm not necessarily making this a pure 2 value. You definitely can, but a lot of times, sometimes I don't always keep it that simple. Sometimes it might be something more like a 3 value where I'm sort of mapping out the shadows and I'm mapping out maybe the occlusion shadows as well, just those darker areas within the shadow. But still trying to keep it on the simple side. And a bit on the softer side as well, so that I can always go a little bit harder and get a little more detailed if I want to. And I should say too, I'm using a bit of a softer pencil, which sort of just allows me to blend more. And especially for this sort of approach, I like it a lot because these shapes aren't super exact, and so I kind of want to be able to play with them. I want to be able to move them around a bit. I'm still always sort of aiming to get them as perfect as possible, but most of the time I know that things will move. And even at this point as well, I would say I'm sort of thinking about what I want this overall composition to be. I have a lot of space on either side, and so I can sort of decide where I want to go with it. I'll probably have some sort of a darker shape in this upper right hand side. And then I think I might just sort of have a gradient, essentially, of getting lighter and lighter as it gets sort of towards the ground, or at least towards this right side. So the reason this all came to mind is just because I'm working on this right leg, and I'm thinking I want to keep it on the lighter side for now, because I probably want to sort of just let it fade in value as it gets to that leg, the whole drawing, I should say. And so the better you get at sort of doing these long figures, the more you'll start to sort of think about how you want to finish the drawing, and we'll be able to get to that quicker. You can sort of aim for the end.
Who would you say are some of your favorite artists, contemporary and past masters?
That's a good question. I would say some of my favorites, just always off the top of my head, I would say probably Leyendecker and Feshen. I'm really big on the designers, people that really change stuff up, make it look interesting. It kind of is always changing, I should say, that sometimes, I'm really hot on a certain artist and I get sort of excited and think they're great. But those are kind of the ones I would say that always stay with me. And then, yeah, of living artists, I'm a really big fan of like Morgan Weisling. Some of those Western painters are really good. Nick Alm, Jeff. A lot of the good portrait painters.
Is portrait in particular one of those areas that you want to go more strongly into for like fine art, or just something you admire? Would you say?
Yeah, I guess it's hard to say for sure. I would say in some sense it's probably the thing I enjoy the most, or I just gravitate towards. That I like, other subject matter as well, like beautiful still lifes and landscapes, but to me, for whatever reason, I really like the great portraits. And there's just, I think something about it's kind of been done forever, and something really cool about it.
So Josh asks, how much are you inventing or modeling at this stage versus just representing what you see?
I would say that's a difficult question to answer. I would essentially say I'm trying not to invent too much at this stage. Essentially, there's still lots of little things that I will change, but for the most part, when I start out, I'm really trying to go very accurate, very close to the shapes I'm seeing, and then as time goes on, I'll just start to design more. And that is to say, I don't usually want to design too much on a macro scale, because if I start changing the overall shape of that arm, it just won't look like his arm anymore. But I could change all sorts of little shapes. I could change the shape of that elbow, or the shape of the wrist, or all sorts of areas. And so I would say some, but I'm definitely focused much more on accuracy. And I'm sort of big on that idea that you want to study and gain knowledge as much as possible sort of outside of the classroom, so that when you come in, you can focus mostly on observation and all of that other information just sort of comes out naturally.
Okay, so another question we've got. I've heard Jeff say that charcoal is a good medium to transition into painting. Do you know what Jeff means by this? Thanks.
Yeah, I would say largely just that it's a tonal medium. It's to say that we're working with light and shadow, and so much of painting just is drawing. And so you can learn drawing through something like pen and ink as well, but it's not going to be as tonal. You know, here I don't necessarily have to use lines. I can just use the side of the pencil and get smooth tone. I can make a very nice drawing with no lines at all. And that's the sort of thing you'll probably be doing in painting, especially something like oil painting. And so it's a great way to sort of learn how to paint. And I feel pretty much that the more I paint, the more I realize that drawing and painting are pretty much the same. And so here at the end of this first session, pretty much for the most part, I have sort of a light overall lay-in of everything in the pose, and that's really what I'm going for. I want it to be a little bit on the light side, a little bit on the soft side, so that I can go in there and I can get harder and put more values in there later. But a lot of times on the break, you can kind of go in and fix up the values a little bit, get things a little bit smoother. But I'm really not too concerned about it at this moment. Again, I'm just trying to make sure that the values are staying a little bit on the lighter side again, and that things are a little bit on the softer side. Oh yeah, sure. We're just going to go into a little break just for a few minutes, probably like 4 minutes from now we'll be back. Cool. Right, everybody, we're back from the break. I'm just going to keep continuing on here with this drawing. And essentially, I sort of think there's a couple different ways you can go from here. I could just go up to the head and sort of finish it off and then finish off another area and keep going on from there. But I probably won't do it that way. I'll probably work up a few different areas and then maybe finish something off. It's just a little more natural for me, or at least it feels like it's less dangerous, essentially. If I go straight for the head, sometimes it might not fit with the rest of the body, and so it's a little easier to sort of work around and start to finish the rest of the drawing and bring it up a bit more. But I probably will go back up to that head just to adjust it a bit. Put in that ear. And you probably noticed as well that, I really am working a bit more tonally, where I'm not really mapping out all the shapes. I'm sort of just drawing the shapes with the pencil. And this is sort of a good example of how painterly drawing works, essentially, where this is what it feels like to me when I'm working in paint a lot of the time, because you're not really drawing with the lines and then filling it in. A lot of the time you're just working straight with tone. You're working with those shapes that are right in front of you. And you have to sort of learn how to see those shapes. So I'm always looking for light and dark shapes. That is to say, this piece of light on the right side of his face, it makes a very distinct shape. And so I'm looking to see that shape, design that shape somewhat, and see how it sort of sits in with the mosaic of all the dark shapes around it. And you could sort of call this phase, what I'm doing right here, just refining. So I'm sort of going back and fixing some of those more crude shapes, essentially, that I put in the very beginning. And cut down on that overall hair shape as well. And I should say, if you guys want to ask any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat. Travis will read them out to me. If you guys have any questions about the process or just anything about the Watts Online at all, feel free.
So James asks, any suggestions for dealing with bad lighting? Sometimes when I go to a life drawing session, it is impossible to sit somewhere with good light. For example, I only see all light or all shadow.
Yeah, I would say, some of it is, you can always try to make suggestions or just do the best with what you have. But really what I would say is that I think a lot of people run from the situations where it's mostly light or mostly shadow. And I really don't think that that's too much of a hindrance in the end. That there are really beautiful drawings that are 90% light. If you look at a lot of Fession's head drawings, they're really, really subtle, and most of it is just in the little shadow shapes more than anything, and some subtle halftones. And so, as much as that might be more difficult to do, most of the time you can make a nice drawing even if the lighting isn't the best. The real hard thing is if you have too many light sources. So if you had, 3 or 4 different lights on somebody, that's where it gets really confusing and really difficult to sort of discern what's happening.
So Alexander asks a good question. Is there a specific reason, aside from personal taste, for not mapping the whole figure before shading more precisely? And I might also add to that maybe just a quick explanation of shadow mapping is probably a good idea.
Yeah, so just to define shadow mapping first, essentially it's this idea that we're defining the edge between the light and the shadow. So this edge between the light on the arm and the shadow, a lot of times people will define it with a core shadow line. And then that's when you map out all of those distinctions between light and shadow, that's what we'd call shadow mapping. And so to here today, I would say I'm essentially shadow mapping. I'm just doing it without drawing lines. And basically, I would say it is largely personal taste, but there are certain advantages to both methods. So if you go in with a real strong map, that is to say, you sort of carefully delineate everything, it sort of makes it so that you know where you're going. You have sort of less room to fall off or sort of find yourself with a bunch of shapes that aren't working. And so this is a bit more advanced a way of working, because you might find yourself halfway through a drawing like this and all the shapes are wrong, and you have to sort of go back and try to fix it, but there's so much tone on the paper that you can't really do it. So that's sort of the downside to this way of working, but I would say the positive side is that it sort of leads to a more painterly drawing. That is to say, things are less sort of cut out, and you can play with the edges in ways that maybe you would in paint. And so that's largely why I really like this this sort of method. And just to explain what I was doing right here, so I basically just took some compressed charcoal, was working out that background a little bit, and a lot of the time at this stage, once I have some of my general values in, let's just say something along the lines of a 2 or 3 value drawing, I want to put in that real dark. I want to put in a true black so that I can sort of judge off of it and use it to help me with judging all my values. Because if you're having trouble sort of judging a value, you can always just look at your darkest value and your lightest value, squint down, and then compare that off of the other values. So if I was trying to figure out what value this arm is, if I squint down and look up there, I can look at sort of the bright highlight on his forehead and the black background, and then say, it's closer to that highlight on the forehead.
So we do have another question. What's the approach to the background? So maybe a little bit on vignetting and things like that.
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit difficult to have any kind of solution for something like a background, but a lot of it is just sort of balance is what I'm thinking about. So there's all sorts of ways you could place light and shadow around this figure to decide what you want to be most interesting or what you want to emphasize, essentially. And in this drawing, I kind of like this idea of having a small amount of black, a small amount of interest, or I should say an area of interest that is small, where it's this one spot, and everything else would be somewhat of a lighter value. So your eye is sort of drawn to that area. But there's a lot of other sort of small principles that I think about. Again, sort of always relating back to balance. So saying, okay, well, there's this large area of white here before. I want to sort of break up that space. Or I'd probably break up this space as well by just using some sort of gradient. I just don't want too much negative space. And I also sort of think of this idea of what you'd call like dominant value. So it's to say that in the whole of the picture, I want there to be a dominant value. So this picture as of right now is predominantly sort of like a light halftone, if you were looking at all the values here. And then there's one area of real dark. So your eye goes to that area. You could do the opposite, though. You could have this whole drawing be pretty much black, and then maybe just have one white dot on the page, and instantly your eye would always go to that white dot.
Any tips for shading across or with the form?
That's always a difficult question, I would say. Really, the biggest help, I would say, is just studying other artists. You can, and learning about the forms. So really trying to understand your subject and then drawing from other great artists who also understand that subject. To me, that's the best way to really understand how you want to, draw lines around the form. And I could probably come up with some kind of a formula for when I use one or the other of, I usually go this way or that way, but there's a lot of subjectivity in it, and different artists just like different approaches. And so I would say, yeah, largely just studying from good artists and artists that you really like the way that they do their cross-contouring.
So that kind of filters into the next question a little bit. Laska asks, any suggestions for rolling the form in a natural way and not overly smooth?
I would say the biggest thing is sort of just to think of form as planar. So to say, while it's helpful to think of that arm as a pure cylinder, I try to think about it as having planes, so as if it was sort of an octagon, and this plane right here might be the brightest plane, and then the plane next to it will be a slightly darker halftone, and then this plane here would be in shadow. And to me, thinking of it that way sort of keeps me from over modeling too much. That is to say, making the forms too round and adding in too many steps so that it's overly smooth.
So Ty asks, do you need to learn anatomy to be able to draw from life well?
I would say yes. It's not to say that you couldn't make a decent drawing if you didn't understand anatomy, but it helps so much. You'll really understand what you're seeing, and that's really, I think, the greatest benefit of understanding anatomy. It's not that you necessarily have to know it so that you always need to design it. Designing it definitely helps, but really, once you start to understand the anatomy, you see it up there, and you actually understand what you're seeing. So it helps you in just being able to observe better. And I think it's very crucial if you want to get really good at figure drawing to really study anatomy and sort of those constructive forms.
Where would you say are some places that people could go to take a deep dive into anatomy and construction and stuff like that?
Yeah, I would definitely say, the online is great. There's the constructive figure drawing, I think, with Brian. And then you could always do the anatomy intensives after that, once you feel like you have a decent grasp on it. But there's also some good books as well. Obviously, the Bridgman book and Jeff's sort of interpretations of the Bridgman book. And then I would say, if you're just starting out, the best things would probably be that constructive figure drawing course and someone like Michael Hampton in his book, Figure Drawing Design and Invention, I think is what it's called. And so as I'm sort of working this out, I did sort of start to just render this arm, essentially. You could bring everything up together in the same process, but a lot of times I like to sort of hone in on one area if I think it would help me to move along a little bit faster. It sort of allows you to get a little bit more subtlety as well.
Did you ever look much at the Goldfinger book? Somebody mentioned it.
No, I definitely studied the Goldfinger book. I think the only reason I didn't mention it right now is just that I would say it's more advanced. But no, I looked a lot at the Goldfinger book. I would say a lot of my anatomy study after Hampton was the Bridgman book and Elliot Goldfinger. Do you remember the name of that book?
I think it's just
The Human
Anatomy for
Yeah,
Artists.
Human Anatomy for Artists. Yeah. So I do think it is really helpful because the more you sort of dive in, the more you'll want to know like the exact answers of, oh, where does this originate? Where does this insert? And really understand what you're drawing, because Bridgman is really, really good at sort of showing the constructive forms and how you should apply the anatomy, but it's just confusing. So having some guides like Jeff's book or the Goldfinger book are really, really helpful in sort of understanding it. And then really trying to memorize it as well, because I would really emphasize that it's very important to not just know the anatomy up there, but to be able to draw it pretty much from memory if you want to get better at life drawing and sort of drawing in a quicker way. You can always sort of pull on that knowledge when you need to. And as I'm sort of rendering these forms as well, I would say a lot of what I think about is trying to roll the form. So I'm trying to get that illusion of three-dimensionality. I'm trying to make sure that I get that big squinted look. So if I look up there and I squint, I can see the rolling of those forms. But then I open my eyes and I can see some of those like interesting looking details. And so I'm trying to marry those two things together and really have something that looks nice from up close, but also reads properly from afar.
Give you a little break for a second while you focus on drawing.
No worries. Can you turn your right knee just in a little bit? Yeah, just like that. Thank you.
So, any tips for trying not to rush or focus too much on a specific part of the figure? I've been taking off my glasses to do that, but it's not really sustainable.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, a lot of it is just really trying to set that focus in the beginning, that you kind of know how much finish you want to have. So because this is somewhere in that 2.5, 3 hour figure range, I know sort of the finish I'm aiming for. And if you know that you can kind of set your pace properly, versus if I was trying to do something like a graphite finish, like that level of finish right now, it would probably, I'd go too slow and I'd get stuck in certain areas, and then I really wouldn't get that much done on the whole. And so that's probably the thing that helps me the most.
Brandon asks, how has having to demo once you became an instructor changed your process?
Probably in lots of different ways. I mean, I guess in the biggest one is that it sort of forces you to finish things within a very specific sort of time frame, and pushes you to just make it look as good as you can in a very specific amount of time. So I would say that essentially is what's changed, and it just sort of pushes you to do better than you probably would do any otherwise. So I do think it's made me faster in some ways, and sort of pushed me to find, what's necessary in a certain amount of time. So if I only have 25 minutes, what could I do, 5 minutes after, just in the break? What could I fix and change versus what needs to be done while the model is still up there? Sure. I mean, you can ask questions if you want, if there are more, but. Cool. Alrighty, so we're back from this break. See, I was just using a little bit of vine charcoal. A lot of times I like it to play around with the background a bit. And it's just so soft that it gives me more that painterly look. And if I don't like something, I can always just sort of brush it away. It erases out really, really easily. And you can really mesh areas together really easily if you want to sort of blend a large area, bring those shadows together. Something I should say as well is that, I'm always thinking about keeping my shadow family and my light family separate, trying to make sure that they're distinct. Sort of gives strength to the whole picture. You have those strong light and shadow areas.
So you did talk about your inspirations a little bit already. Brendan, let's see. Hold on a sec here. Okay, who are your inspirations? Doesn't have to be an artist, but anyone that affected you artistically. So are there any non-artists that have affected you?
Probably. That's a good question. What would I say? No, yeah, maybe I just need to think about it for a minute. Yeah, for sure.
So Oliver asks, what are you most excited about in the next 6 months? Any personal projects in that?
That's a good question too. I would say, probably just painting more, essentially. There was a while there where I wasn't doing a lot of painting, but kind of now back into it. So that's been fun. And then sort of a bigger freelance project that's sort of wrapping up. So that'll be nice to kind of finish that off.
Do you ever have any plans for any like big painting projects? Like I remember back in the day seeing videos of one of Stan's first big projects, the wood cutting lesson one, and I kind of wonder if you would have any ambitions to do something large like that.
I definitely do. I mean, my ambition would be to do like I love medieval stuff, so I'd love to do some like a big piece with a bunch of different knights in it, because I also love like really complex paintings. And so something like that I would love to do. But it's always hard because it's one of those things of like, how much work it really takes. And it's a big undertaking to start a painting like that. But yeah, I definitely have plans to do it eventually. It's just actually getting started on it is the hard thing. Yeah.
Do you remember Ben Plant, who was here quite a few terms ago? He says, all I want for Christmas is Evan's ability to carve form and simplify character. Lars from the boot camp is also in here. He says, your instruction at the boot camp this summer was truly inspiring. The group still meets online every Sunday to boost each other. You and Travis come up regularly. That's nice. Thanks, Lars.
Yeah, it'd be fun to join sometime. Say hello.
Yeah, for sure.
He says, especially your sketchbooks, they encouraged people to draw more, and even when they didn't have access to the full newsprint and charcoal set.
That's cool.
I guess speaking of that, what do you normally sketch with? Is it just graphite and whatnot?
Yeah, it kind of changed over time, but I can't remember if I probably showed him. There was I haven't done it as much recently, but there was a while where I was sketching a lot with just sort of like 6B graphite pencils, and on that hammer mill
Oh
color
yeah,
copy paper.
yeah. That's exactly what I use to sketch some things.
Because it's really smooth and it feels a lot like the newsprint to me, and so I liked that a lot. And yeah, I would just kind of draw like that all the time and sharpen the pencils. Actually, I mean they weren't that sharp, but I just use them on the side, kind of like these pencils. And it's a great way to go, especially if maybe you don't have access to some of these materials, because I know people sometimes have a hard time finding them in like other countries and that sort of thing.
We also heard from Roberto. He says, "Great drawing, Evan. Hope you guys are good."
Sweet. It's fun to hear from all you guys, and it's fun to think about too. Really, all the people that have been inspirational to me, because I remember before I came to the school, seeing Roberto's stuff, and getting excited about coming out here, and watching these Friday Night Lives years ago. Now getting to be part of one, really cool.
Yeah, I remember back in the day looking at Roberto's Instagram and seeing his stories that he'd put up of modeling sessions and stuff, and that was super inspirational. Me and Evan started about the same time. For anybody who doesn't know, me and Evan started about the same time at the school. And then I think Roberto had been here for a year or two already, so we were kind of seeing some of the... So go check out some of his artwork, because he's great.
Yeah, I remember coming here, and I got here, I feel like, almost like the term after a bunch of really good guys left the school. There was sort of a group of artists that were really good, but they were a big inspiration to me, because to me, I felt like they were the guys who got really good right before we sort of came up. And it's always nice to have that person just a little bit in front of you to show you that you can get better, and give you some inspiration to go for it.
Christ on Campus says, "We love you, Evan. We're here watching you with Salt of Sea and some pin."
Oh, that's sweet. I think that's my sister.
Well, that's actually pretty interesting, because we can talk for a second about, you did your own kind of card game that you had made a little while back. You did all the artwork, the game design, or did you work with like a...
No, I did game design stuff for it. It was sort of just a project idea that I had of, if I could sort of make my own game and do a Kickstarter for it and all that sort of thing. So it was definitely a good, great way to learn sort of how that whole world works, from doing it, and taking it all the way to have a actual finished game in the end. Was pretty cool, but difficult as well, for sure.
What was it like going through the process of... Because you actually got it printed as like a real... card game. So what was it like trying to find people? And you did it on Kickstarter as well, which is kind of...
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it was just sort of researching from other people who had done it before. It's probably the most helpful thing. And finding, there's podcasts that I found that was really, really helpful. These guys who, they're just all about Kickstarter, and sort of running campaigns and all that sort of thing, and they even had their own business for like doing that sort of thing and helping people with theirs. And that they helped me so much in that sense, just listening to them and all their sort of strategies, and they had figured out what they sort of needed to do it. And they were doing board games as well, because Kickstarter is kind of a place where a lot of people do sort of self-produced board games. It's kind of interesting, but it's very common on there. And so I would generally say, yeah, really, it was mostly just finding other people that I could learn from, and that knew it way better than I did. But just sort of continuing on in this drawing, I'm kind of just jumping around here and there. It's a lot of the time the way I sort of do my own drawings is I don't always really build them up all together exactly the same. That would be nice, but most of the time I kind of start with maybe something a little softer, more in that tonal range, and then sort of maybe start to finish off areas and bring everything together and make sure it's all sort of working as one. And something really important too for anyone who's getting started doing this kind of figure drawing is always just leaning back and getting far away from your pad, because we're working on such big drawing pads that you really want to see your entire drawing, and most of the time you have to maybe stand like 5 feet back to really get a clear look at it, or at least just always be leaning back to try to see all the drawing sort of come together.
So Elise C says, "Hey, it's your sis. Keep up the good work. You're very musically talented as well. Do you find your music and art talents blend? Does one ever influence the other?"
Thanks, sis. Yeah, I would definitely say so. The interesting thing is just I'm always looking for the little parallels. That's probably the biggest way. It's almost like the mindset, I think, is the thing that I think about that is very similar among both. That if I'm trying to do a ballpoint pen sketch where I have to sort of hold everything together, but I'm working on one area, it actually has a similar feeling to trying to like write a song where you're trying to hold all the concepts in your head, but then I'm kind of just trying to ad-lib the words at the same time, and that might not make sense to anyone else other than me, but it definitely has a lot of overlap for me. And I find that pretty much, yeah, learning any new skill helps a lot, because it just sort of changes the way I think about it a little bit. That if some kind of concept makes sense somewhere else, I can usually apply it, and it helps me a lot. Something odd I'll do sometimes too is I actually just turn my drawing upside down. It helps me usually to just see if there's something off. It's kind of like using a mirror, a lot of people will do. And it'll help me sometimes to check if there's a value that's just out of place, or something will look off to me. I haven't really seen anyone else do it, but it seems to help me. And so I do that a decent bit.
So, one interesting question I think is what has it been like going from the process of, just first knowing about Watts, moving your life out here, becoming a student, staying for a while, becoming an instructor eventually. Like, what's that process been like for you?
It's been really cool. It's definitely had its ups and downs. That is to say that, I think sometimes it's easy to look at someone that maybe has the skills you want to have, or like, you see Jeff drawing and you kind of just imagine he's never had any difficulties in his training. He's just cruised right along. But I was thinking about it the other day because one of the students was asking me about like frustration and if I ever had frustration in my studying, and I definitely did. There's sort of eras that you go through where you can see the problems in your work, but you're not very good at fixing them. And so, not this is exactly the answer to the question you're asking, but yeah, no, it's definitely been a great ride of getting better and being able to come out here, and it was definitely a dream of mine to come to the school, and been really cool to get to know everyone here and just sort of slowly get better and slowly learn a little bit day by day. And the interesting thing I think about too is that just the change that happens even in like what I think is good or stylistic things, because you sort of have an idea in your mind of exactly how you want to draw maybe when you start out and how that changes. You can't always really predict it because a lot of things will change over time. But yeah, it really has been very cool, and fun. And I do think about sometimes of if I could talk to my like high school self and tell myself that I was teaching at Watts, that like me watching the Proco videos years ago, I think would have thought it was just wild, because I always just thought it was such a cool place that I was like, oh, maybe I'll go there someday. Like, I'd love to. Yeah, now it's just a real blessing to be able to teach here. Because I always remember watching, I don't know if any of you guys will know about who Will Terrell is, but he was a student here a long time ago, and I would watch his he had these sketchbook videos. And that, those and Proco's videos sort of were my introduction to Watts Atelier. And after that, I was like, I really wanted to come out here after seeing those.
Yeah, I never seen some of those back in the day too.
Yeah, I still like going through them every once in a while, and just, remembering that. And it's very interesting to see how your eye changes over time, because, the drawings of his that maybe I didn't see, like he would talk about them as bad even. He'd be like, I'm not good. And I think at the time I was like, oh, they're pretty good though, but then I could see it much better later on. But the Watts drawings were still really good though.
They've always been good.
Yeah.
So kind of in that vein, what would you say is, I can't remember if we've mentioned this much already at this point, but what would you say is kind of next for you as far as like career goals?
It's hard to say. At this point, yeah, I don't really know. I would like to do some bigger paintings, and work on some more freelance stuff. And in some sense, I would say at this point, a lot of it is just seeing, just kind of writing what works, if that makes sense. That, if I really enjoy doing something or if something's working well, kind of just taking that where it leads, and trying to enjoy what I'm doing and not chase things too much. Because, I think sometimes it's easy to chase something and then you end up getting it and then you find that really wasn't exactly what you thought it was anyways. And then a lot of people end up just chasing something new because that might be the answer to all of life's problems. But
Well, this is interesting because somebody asked kind of a relevant question to that. Um, Alexander says, I'm in love with my university degree and I no longer have as big of a thirst to draw. I don't like this, but should I accept that? I'm just not going to get better until I leave uni. He says, I try to draw as much as I can, but I really like my degree and it's very time consuming. So even if I don't like it, I can't help it. He says, apologies for asking such a weird question, but I don't think it's that weird.
I mean, I would say, you know, maybe it's just a time when you don't draw as much, really. Because I have found in my time of drawing that sometimes you go through spells where you don't think you really want to draw very much. And sometimes you just need a break. You just need some time off. While, you know, if you really want to get good, you want to keep studying in some sense as much as you can. Sometimes I think the breaks can be really helpful. They can give you a lot more like sort of refreshed energy to go back and to draw more. And so I would essentially say, just, you know, maybe write it where it goes. So if you don't want to draw now, just take some time off and from drawing, and then maybe eventually you'll come back to it with a more energy than you actually had before, because that enthusiasm is actually really important. It can make a big difference in even just how your drawings turn out every day. If you're enthusiastic to go in there and study something, you'll probably do a much better job. And so it's something I think about a lot, of trying to follow that enthusiasm. You know, if I'm excited about something, I'll try to do more of it, or, you know, find even the piece of reference that's exciting.
So maybe instead of going on a, you know, like an intermission break on here, we'll just kind of sit and continue talking for a little bit in between. One thing I wanted to ask was, what was, if anything in particular, that you really struggled with in terms of learning? Has it been painting? Has it been drawing related? Has it been something more cerebral than that in a different way?
I would say, I mean, in some sense, it's a lot of the same difficulties that everyone has, where like just getting everything to work together. So like trying to think about values and getting the proportions right and just getting everything to work. But if I was going to pinpoint to something in particular, I'd probably say just objectivity of values and shapes, because I started out with the online, and so I was sort of steeped in like Jeff's design. So I felt like a lot of people might struggle with design, but that part I was like always going towards, because I was like, oh, the design looks so cool, and I'm going towards that. But then eventually I realized that I needed more objectivity in there. Like I needed to be able to get the shapes and values that I see and then add in design, or like, you know, balance them properly. So I feel like that was kind of a long difficulty of like just trying to get the drawings to look like the drawings I wanted them to look like. Yeah. Yeah, discovering design on my own and understanding how to get the objective drawing down so that then I could play with it, versus like having something that was really designy but just wrong. You know, maybe I thought it looked cool, but it wasn't all that I wanted it to be. Yeah.
I would definitely say I 100% resonate with you on that. Just like, how do you keep those fundamentals intact, but then kind of push it your own direction?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I find it interesting too how different people have different difficulties, where some people are really objective and they're trying to get more design, and they're trying to get that. But like that, I don't think that was my problem. I was like, I wanted more objectivity. And for those of you who know who Jim Hahn is, he's just one of the other teachers here. I remember taking classes with him, and that was really helpful because he's much more on that less design side. And so he kind of helped me understand what that looks like and when it looks really cool in a different way. So I do think that's really helpful sometimes, to just have multiple influences of different teachers at the school, even though we all follow that same method. Essentially, we have our subtle different ways.
Yeah, it's kind of where you start, and then you just start sort of branching off. Mm-hmm. Sorry, everybody. I think I forgot to mute my mic. I have a mic on my computer, and there's the mic here, so I think I just let it roll, and it was super echoey. So sorry, everybody. We're still learning here. We have some other questions I came into. Earlier, Tate had asked, and you sort of mentioned this earlier, how would you approach working with limited materials, like if you can't get your hands on smooth newsprint?
Yeah, I would say, in some sense, you really can do, you can learn so much with even bad materials. Like, sure, you want to find something better, but if all you have is a ballpoint pen and like printer paper, it's surprising what you could do. I think people kind of underestimate how good of a drawing you really could do with just those materials. But if you couldn't get smooth newsprint and charcoal, I would really recommend graphite and smooth paper, some kind of really nice smooth paper. And I like that hammer mill color copy paper a lot for doing that sort of thing. But the other thing I would say too is to buy materials that you aren't too precious about. Because, you know, if you want to get better at drawing, especially like figure drawing, head drawing or something like that, you need to go through a lot of drawings. You need to do thousands of drawings. And so whatever material you can buy that's cheap and that like works, that's what I'd go for. And that's the great thing about like newsprint. If you buy it in the big packs, you can go through so many drawings, and you don't feel bad about just, you know, doing big lay-ins over and over and over again, because that's really the type of study that you need.
So Lars had asked, what do you feel like is a learning challenge for you today? And what skill do you feel like you will level up next?
Oh, that's an interesting question. What was the first part of the question? Can you
Lars said, what do you feel like is a learning challenge for you today?
Okay. I would say the thing I'm thinking about a lot recently is sort of value simplification or classification. It's something Richard Schmid talks a lot about, and like Sargent does really well, where you're cutting your values to like a specific number, or you're choosing to only put in so many values. And it's difficult to do because you kind of have to be very like careful and specific about not putting in too many values and breaking things apart as much, and it'll lead to something more solid, more simple, that reads really clearly. But it's something that I've just been thinking about more, and just values in general, of how to get the values looking accurate and not too complicated or anything. But the area where I feel like I'd level up, I would say that is probably one of the things I would say, of just leveling up in and getting better at judging those values and simplifying them somewhat. But there's lots of other things too. Like there's some areas like what would I call it, like material design, so or material invention that I was working on somewhat. It's been a little while, but basically if I want to do certain types of illustration work, being able to say, okay, if I need to make a monster that looks like a cloud, you know, it's made out of cloud, I need to know how to like all the ways that a cloud reflects light, essentially. So you do like a study and just imagining, okay, I'm going to do a ball, but it's made of cloud, and you know, if it had a warm light and a cool light, how would the edges work, and that sort of thing. Or like, it gets complicated, but it's a really interesting thing that I haven't done a lot of, that I want to do more of. And same with, you know, what if it was like, it was a really shiny ball or something, and it had specific texture and that sort of thing, and being able to invent it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really on that one. It's hard.
Yeah, it's difficult, but there's people that are so good at it. I mean, it's very impressive to me, you know. Yeah.
I think a while back I think his name was Clint Clearly. He's an illustrator, but he was doing some demos that were like draw or paint a suit of armor, but paint it as if it were crystal, or you know, something like that, which was kind of cool, I thought.
It's kind of mind-bending to try to wrap your head around it, but it's really cool. But sort of just going back up to this head, and now at this point I can kind of slow down because I feel like I have a lot of the figure in there, and sort of just choosing where I want to put more detail. And again, that's one of the nice things I think about doing a more tonal approach, is that I can leave this arm in some sense. I mean, I'll go back to it almost certainly, but I could leave that arm if I wanted to, if I just wanted to let it to totally diffuse into the background. But, you know, I'll go back in and say, maybe I want to define this hand more, I want to define this foot. But you can kind of stop whenever you want to and still have a statement that works.
And just because you mentioned that too, we don't have to go for the full 3 hours. We can,
For sure.
be done.
Yeah.
Maddie Yamamoto says, make more games, and says, happy to see you're doing well, Evan.
Sweet. Nice to hear from you, Maddie.
So while we're on, just going to let Evan draw for a bit while we're waiting for more questions to come in. I will mention that the Watts on Bridgman course is going to be released in the next few days. On October 15th is when that comes out. wattsatelier.com/Bridgman. You can find it, and that'll be the ebooks. Evan mentioned it a little bit earlier as well for Jeff's version of the Bridgman, breaking down Bridgman's drawings. And there's a lot of other extra stuff in there. The whole course has videos. You can download all of it and save it all and everything. So that's going to be coming out. I think that's on Wednesday next week. So look forward to that.
And just to say a little bit about the pencils I've been using. A lot of times I'll start with a softer pencil like the Generals, or I've been using these Gioconda pencils. And then a lot of times as I get later in the drawing, I'll start using the Wolf's Carbons, just because they're a little harder and I can render a little bit easier with them. A lot of the smaller details stay a lot easier. And so I'll kind of go back between those, and then also, you know, use some Vine in this drawing as well.
So we've got another question here from Alexander, who says, what new information can you get when doing very basic exercises when you're fairly advanced? I've seen Stephen Bauman draw the same freaking sphere hundreds of times, and I don't get why.
I would say it's largely just that you're just getting better at the same things, if that makes sense. That I'll go back and draw spheres sometimes because it's essentially that, you know, sometimes you might think that you have it down. You know, you're like, I know how to draw a sphere, but that sort of fundamental idea of saying, can I make this form roll, is like the principle I'm using everywhere on this drawing, of like, I'm trying to make this form roll here and this right there over that cylinder of the arm or over the deltoid, and getting all sorts of interesting like subtleties in there. And so I can't say for sure for Stephen Bauman, but I would say for me and for a lot of people, it's sort of about going back and just trying to do the absolute best you can with what you maybe couldn't do that well before. And I also think about studying in a similar way in general, that I think you should try to practice on both ends of the spectrum. That is to say that I try to push myself further to do stuff I can't really do very well, like, you know, push into the deep end of the pool where your feet can barely touch, but then go back to the kiddie pool, essentially. You know, go back to where you know everything well and do it perfectly. Do it as exact as you can. And I think you'll find that you learn a lot from kind of pushing both ends of that spectrum. Thanks.
So we do have a question from Armando. Armando's a student here. Besides being asked by Jeff, why did you want to teach at Watts? What do you enjoy about teaching? What frustrates you about teaching? Also, when is your Christmas album being released?
Well, I don't have any plans for Christmas album. Sorry, but I would say for teaching, I would say in the beginning, a lot of it was just seeing that the teachers were the level of like quality that I wanted to be. So I saw people like Stan and Eric and Ron and all these people that were really, really good, and I wanted to be that level of have that level of skill, essentially. And I think that was maybe the first like impetus of being like, oh, it'd be really cool to teach. And then also just loving being at the school. You know, it's just a really fun place to be, and I love being around people that really enjoy art and want to learn more about all this stuff, because really it's not everywhere that you find people that are really interested in getting better at drawing, and that you can talk even about like shapes and values and edges and line decker, and people understand what you're talking about. So I think those things were kind of that initial again impetus to go into teaching. But I also think it's been incredibly helpful in just getting better at like actually understanding what I'm doing, trying to explain it to other people, and it's very rewarding in that sense of being able to help people kind of make their own breakthroughs in learning, and sort of, you know, all loving drawing together. And then I think you said ask difficulties of it. And really it would just be, that's just sometimes it's just difficult to explain concepts, that trying to like get into someone else's mind. But at the same time, even though that might be like difficult and not always the most enjoyable, I think when the concept actually breaks through, that can be really fun to sort of enjoy that with someone, where they've made a breakthrough in their art and they feel like their drawings look way better, to sort of be able to, in some sense, celebrate with them in getting through that stage. And knowing how much of that, you know, happened for me, I think that's a great part of it too, is knowing all the things that, you know, the teachers here said to me and helped me with and encouraged me along to keep going. Because pretty much all of us, you know, again, go through those difficult times or just have to really, you know, you can test your resolve of if you want to keep going, because it can take a long time to really get better at this stuff.
Yeah, atelier style environment works pretty good.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. And I mean, really, I also just love the fact that everyone who's here wants to be here. That nobody has to take like a college algebra class to stay here. You know, it's like if you chose the class, it's because you wanted to be in there, and so everyone is really here just to learn. There's not really much else of a reason, and so it's a really cool environment.
What advice would you give for somebody who's just starting to get their sea legs with drawing? Like, what kind of exercises would they might want to work on? And yeah.
I would say, essentially, it's like the stuff in the beginning of the online, so like basic shape exercises. So drawing all those forms. So drawing, you know, a sphere, a cone, a cylinder. And then I would say really just slow, careful learning how to measure, learning how to draw. So like, I remember drawing some of the Barg plates when I first started. And that's to say, there's like this drawing system created by this guy, Charles Barg. And they're these really simple but nice looking drawings. And maybe simple isn't even the right word. Some of them are really complex, but the ones I was drawing were very simple. And I would just take kind of a long time to try to get them really accurate. And I think it's a great way to start when you're just very in the beginning, to just go slowly and learn what it really takes to draw, where you have to, you know, check where the plumb line lines up with and see those shapes clearly, because a lot of the time that's really what someone who's just starting really needs to do. They just have to anchor down and say, can I get this Barg plate to look like that? Or can I get my drawing to look like the Barg plate? And it's still really hard. It's very difficult, even if it's a simple drawing.
So we got another question from Lars. When you're working on your medieval drawings, how much do you use reference versus how much comes from your imagination? What's your secret sauce for developing the ability to draw from imagination?
I would say it really depends on what I'm drawing. So if I'm trying to do like a full illustration, a lot of it is not going to come from my mind. Maybe in the very beginning it will. But if I'm trying to get like a really high level of finish, the more reference I'll try to find. But I do a lot of like inks essentially, or like digital inks. And for those ones, I invent all the time. And so a lot of it is, I would say, first, just being able to understand form is so helpful. So you have to basically start with, just like I was saying, for someone who's starting out in the very beginning, learn how to draw just basic forms, like and then learn how to do it from imagination. Learn how to say, can I render a sphere? Can I render a cylinder from imagination? And then once you feel really good at those, then you start to apply those in more complex situations. So can you do something like a head from imagination, or could you just, you know, make up some kind of simple creature and render those forms? And then I would say, once you can do that, then the sky's kind of the limit of learning about other things. So like if you want to learn how to draw a helmet, or you want to learn how to draw like armor, then I mean, armor is like all cylinders, and you just have to learn how to do chrome. And so if you could do chrome cylinders, you could basically invent a medieval guy in like 10 minutes. But I will say, so if I wanted to do a really nice illustration, though. Most of the time, I would maybe do some kind of invention first to get a general idea of what I want, and then I would either sculpt it, or I would find some kind of way to get some reference. And I would just look at someone like James Gurney. I can't remember the name of that. Imaginative illustration, or is that? Yeah, imaginative realism. Thank you. And that, that book really takes you through how you would do that sort of thing. And there's lots of different methods of like coming up with reference that'll work for you. But that's basically what I would say. And for me, I'll do some like 3D sculpting stuff, so that's how I like make the reference. But some people do it traditionally, where they're like James Gurney does it that way. He'll really make whatever it is in like a little miniature form.
You use 3D?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm that great at it, but I use an iPad program called Nomad to do some like sculpting stuff. Yeah. But in some sense, also, I should say that like, if I wanted to do medieval paintings for like a fine art career or something, I'd end up just building a collection of that kind of clothing and that kind of armor, because then you have perfect reference all the time that you can fit into any situation. And that's what you see a lot of the Western fine artist guys do, where they have all sorts of like great costumes and all that sort of stuff, and then they can make their own scenes all the time if they really want to.
Double painting portraits, which is cool, which is 6 hours, so people get a lot longer time on portraits. No, I haven't done that in 4 years. So that's a fun one. Just pushing people to do longer finishes.
We had a question from David Santos, who asks, "Hey Evan, what are your favorite drawing genres and subject matter?"
Hey David, good to hear from you. Favorite genres and subject matter. I mean, medieval stuff is up there for sure for me. I really love that era, and just that era of like clothing as well. So like people like John William Waterhouse, and I also I would say I love like traditional fantasy. So pirates as well are definitely in there. So people like N.C. Wyeth, who kind of do both. They'll do traditional knights and they do pirates and that sort of thing. But I would also say I love religious paintings and like religious sculptures. I just think are gorgeous. Like if you go into, St. Peter's in Rome and that sort of thing, just those like larger than life sculptures that are just incredible. And I love that. There was a question like a while ago about what inspires me to do art. I love that motivation for creating art, that like it's the gaze for heaven. It's the thing that brings you to something more beautiful than you can imagine. And people make art for all sorts of reasons, but I love that idea that like when people make music, it's to bring you to something higher that you don't normally think of. It's to bring you to something more beautiful.
That's what we were trying to work through on the Sundays. Every artist has that. So yeah, so just some good encouragement, coaching, and stuff like that, just to get him. But I think he'll come back to the Sundays. I don't know, but I know he really knows it's kind of make it or break it time. Swim chicken.
I'm good. Oh, I mean, we can keep asking questions. I'm just was looking at my drawing from further away.
So you just wanted a little time. Oh, cool. Maybe.
everybody, just back from the break. Just continuing on here. Again, most things are laid in, but a lot of what I'm doing now is sort of just fixing things and deciding really what I want, where I want to take this drawing. So just like I was saying, it's like, how much information do I actually want to put in certain areas? But I'm always looking to make the drawing very cohesive and interesting and have that variation, but still have it all hold together. So sort of the stage we're at with this drawing right now.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about, in your experience, how life work and drawing, painting from life differs a bit from studio work.
Obviously, there's lots of different things you learn from drawing from life all the time, but one of the biggest things, is just you're always under some kind of constraint. Essentially, it keeps you from sort of being lazy or just going too slow, because you only have so much time, and you're really trying to get something done in that amount of time, and you're around lots of other people that are used to that and can get something down within 3 hours or 20 minutes or whatever the amount of time is. And so it sort of forces you to just be better. Just like I was saying about having to demo, it forces you to be better to another level of that as well. But everyone at the school has to try to get something done in 3 hours, and it kind of forces you to another level. And there's particular benefits as well, that you're actually seeing real values the way your eye actually sees them when you're looking up there and when you're squinting. And so it really teaches you how to observe nature better, and especially when it comes to painting, because then you have to observe real color. And I would say, while photos lie in value, they lie the most in color. They're always wrong, essentially. You can sometimes have stuff that has good color, but oftentimes it's just not the same as the actual color would be. And so it helps a lot to study from life in that way, especially. And again, it sort of just, I think, forces you to be a better artist. And you hear it even from people who do animals from life as well, that all these things just allow you to understand whatever you're drawing, even if you might not be able to draw it the same way you'd want to if you're drawing at the zoo, but it helps you to, again, understand, have a more overall knowledge. Largely just sort of nudging shapes around in this head right now, really trying to solidify everything, largely because, again, this method of starting more tonal and then sort of refining after, you have a much higher chance of losing the overall structure of what you're doing, because you're not really starting with it. And so oftentimes I'm continually adding more and more structure as I'm going, rather than starting with everything and then almost removing some. Sometimes I'll turn my pad a bit just to give me the sort of exact strokes that I'm looking for. You'll see people do it all the time in inking, just because you want to pull that perfect line essentially, and so especially if I'm getting closer to the end of a drawing, I might want to pull an exact little line, and so I'll just do whatever it takes to sort of get what I'm looking for. Can pull out that vein that I'm seeing. And I should talk a little bit too about I'm pretty much always thinking about edge variation. So even if I pull out that little edge with my pull out that highlight, I should say, with my eraser, I want to play with the edge more, because when I do that, it's just hard edged all around. And so a lot of times I'll just soften a little bit with my finger to sort of blend it into the rest of the form. But I'm also thinking about that everywhere else, where I'm looking at this edge on the elbow, and it goes from a little bit harder to a little bit softer to a little bit harder again. And it's something I'm pretty much always thinking about, is just how can I subtly play with the edge variation to make it look interesting and fun to look at. There's definitely a point at which you can go too far and it just gets too messy and crazy. And so it's usually looking for that right amount of balance.
So we had a couple more questions come in. What is the most dangerous, or what are the most dangerous colors to use when painting, do you think?
Really, this question is not really my expertise, but I mean, everyone talks about lead colors being dangerous. I don't know, you might have a better answer to that than me, Travis, but...
Yeah, I think it depends on it. Well, dangerous from the standpoint of physically dangerous, but also dangerous from the standpoint of you'll obliterate your painting if you use too much of it, like phthalo green or phthalo blue.
Okay, say, yeah, it's any of your extreme, like extremely strong pigments, so like your phthalos, phthalo green, phthalo blue, cad orange, cadmium red, those kind of colors. Really, the ones I would say are the most dangerous are going to be your cold colors that are really strong. A lot of the times, a cad orange, while it is really strong, it usually isn't going to like destroy your painting. But if you put like phthalo blue pure on someone's face, it's going to be really hard to warm that up, because it's technically, we usually say, it's harder to warm a cool than it is to cool a warm. So yeah, that's really what I would say. Probably like phthalo blue, phthalo green, and maybe alizarin crimson too. But it's not maybe as dangerous as the others.
I would also add that from the physical danger standpoint, definitely what you said, the lead and some of the cadmiums and stuff like that. But you mentioned James Gurney earlier. In the back of his color and light book, I believe he actually has a reference guide that tells you the danger level of each pigment. Yeah. And maybe one other thing I would add too is if you ever get some old oil paint from like an old relative or something like that, just check it out to make sure there's no like mercury in it or something like that, because that happens sometimes.
Can happen to anyone.
I have some more questions here. Alexander asks, are there any resources for learning ballpoint pen that are available outside of the school? Online courses, books, artists, the works. Do you think you can do a ballpoint pen master study of a tonal work?
I would say, to the second question, yes, you can definitely do a ballpoint pen study of a tonal work. It does depend on what style you want to go for. If you go like slow enough and careful enough, you can get almost smooth ballpoint pen. meaning like you almost don't even see the lines. And it's very like time consuming, and I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend it, but it is kind of fun to try. And then as for other like resources and people, I really don't know if I have a lot. There's definitely people that have cool styles of ballpoint pen. I would just say most of my ballpoint pen like style comes a lot from like Jeff and other people at the school. But yeah, I would essentially say if there's anyone that you really like, I would probably study them, you know, try to just do copies of theirs and understand the line work that they're doing, and just incorporate it into how you draw. But again, I would say ballpoint pen is really nice because if you go slow enough, you can really make it almost look like graphite if you're careful. And it's a great way to learn how to be really careful, even if it is a little bit like numbingly slow sometimes.
So we have another question from Armando, who says, what's your favorite class to teach, and what would you like to teach that you haven't already taught?
Favorite class to teach? Maybe right now would be like figure drawing, just because I feel like it changes all the time though. Sometimes it's head drawing, sometimes it's other drawing classes, and that sort of thing. But it's usually maybe just whatever I'm most excited about at the time being. And a class that I haven't taught but would be fun to teach. You know what I was thinking about, clothed figure quick sketch, because it's not taught here very often, and I think it'd be fun to do sometime. Yeah.
Maybe not next year, but the term after, because you're doing all the drapery.
Yeah, the drapery. Yeah.
That'd be a good lead-in.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good one because I think sometimes we do a lot of quick sketch in general, and then you can get really good at that and then not apply it to anything else, and it's kind of like you're in a rut almost of that sort of.
I'm glad that's not what you happen to do.
Yeah, it's really easy to like learn every pose almost, and then you're like, I know how to do this, and then you try to draw like a horse quickly, and you're like, this didn't go so well.
Another question came in. Best way to study hands and feet?
I would say really just there's like a collection of books that I would say the Bridgman 100 Hands book I would recommend, and then I would say Hogarth's Drawing Dynamic Hands book, and then for me this is what I did largely, those two, and then drawing from Leyendecker and Rockwell. At least I really like their hands, and so those things were, the biggest pieces for learning how to draw hands. But also there wasn't. I don't know if there is. Is there a Watts hands one? I know we've had courses but there's not like a definitive one yet.
So we have a lot of stuff coming after Black Friday. It's a bit of a teaser, but we've got a lot of big announcements happening around then, so stay tuned on that. But we've got a lot of courses coming, mostly next year, and hands and feet will be included in that. So I believe it'll be a combination of Ben and Eric, and maybe a little bit of some old stuff we shot with Brian. But it'll be super solid.
Yeah, Ben has some great classes on hands and feet drawing. And really, the one I think about is that there's really not a good book on feet, I would say. There's good pieces in different books, but the hand books are easier to find. Yeah, Bouguereau has great, really subtle feet.
Did you ever see that show when it was here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty crazy.
Waiting for another good one.
Yeah, have they had a lot of San Diego shows like since that one? Yeah, not that I have either. But at this point in the drawing, I'm kind of just adjusting this foot. A lot of what happens sometimes is if you go again this more softer, more tonal route, some things will not be placed correctly. Essentially, some things will be a little bit out of place, and so I have to sort of just nudge them back into place. And you can see too, I'm sort of playing with the edges around the foot. So I'm sort of saying, oh, I'm going to go a little harder here, and then soften up. Maybe I'll lose this edge completely, and just see where I can do that sort of lost and found thing of saying, you know, oh, I'm going to find where that corner of the calf is, but I'm going to lose another part of the leg. It really helps to make interesting drawings that you're kind of surprised by what's there almost. Your mind has to fill in the gaps.
So another really good question from Alexander Lamar. When it comes to light, is there a value that you focus on or think about the most when drawing the figure? Highlights, halftones, coarse shadows, reflected light, etc. Which one is the most important?
That's an interesting question. I feel like it actually depends on the type of lighting on the overall figure probably, because if you're in a really light situation, let's say where there's not a lot of harsh shadows or anything, then it kind of changes what's most important. But generally speaking, if I'm going to say overall in most forms of lighting, what's most important is going to be the form shadows. So is this shadow along the form and what that core is doing, essentially, how that edge is turning into the light. Because I could remove almost everything from the light. We could take out all the highlights, we could take out all the halftones, and just have that shadow edge, and what it tells you could still be a really nice drawing. And so in some sense, I would say it is, yeah, the most important piece, because it shows the turning of the form most. But yeah, if you have different situations, it might vary a bit.
Someone asks, what would you be doing now instead of art?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Like if I didn't do art, is that the idea? I would say, I honestly think maybe I'd either be doing like some kind of design, like graphic design, or be chasing like music. I do think there's some kind of artist within me that just wants to make things, and so one way or another, I think I would be doing something like that. Yeah. Because I always thought it would be fun to try to chase the music path, but you know, who knows what that would look like? Yeah.
Well, get it over till it's over.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I have to come up with the Christmas album.
I feel like that's an inside joke.
It's because I wrote a Christmas song, or like Christmas themed song, yeah, and so yeah, they talk about the Christmas album. Yeah, no one that I've seen does it, but it helps me, yeah, for whatever reason.
Of the teachers, when you were first getting started, between Jeff and Eric and Ben and Jim, is there any one in particular that you resonated with the most, you'd say, as far as design? You did mention Jeff earlier.
I would say, I mean, I really liked Jeff's design a lot coming into the school, and then like Eric's design grew on me, and Ben's design. But yeah, I would say Jeff first was the big inspiration design wise, and then it's probably more Ben now than it is than Jeff at this point, but it does still change over time. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite painting of all time?
Favorite painting of all time?
It's a pretty tough one.
That is a tough one. I might agree with. There's somebody was talking about it. There's a Kromskoy painting called Christ in the Wilderness. Really beautiful painting.
I've seen that one.
Yeah. It's like Christ's temptation in the wilderness, and I think it's Kromskoy. Really, really beautiful painting, though. I'd love to see it someday.
This is the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that looks cool. I always think about that Solomon J. Sampson.
Yeah, it's an incredible piece. Do you have a favorite of all time?
No. I'd say there's a few. I don't know if I can necessarily name them off the top of my head, but there's probably a couple Leindeckers. Some of the Slav epic Muka stuff is up there for sure. I'm a really big fan of Walter Everett's stuff.
Yeah.
There's this one painting that he did that really made an impression on me, which was the nuns. I think it was like a burn umber and white painting. It was just such an amazing like pattern painting. Yeah, really cool shape design, really cool stuff. Just the subtle rendering. Apparently that, I think, burned up in a fire. I heard a lot of his stuff I heard got lost.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know which paintings, but I mean, Rockwell had his big fire and stuff too.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right, yeah.
Some probably great paintings are just gone.
Well, they'd be gone eventually anyway.
Yeah.
It was a bummer if it gets burned up at fire. Yeah, I don't think I really have a favorite. It's too many.
So any tips for invented drapery or lighting? You did talk a little bit about this earlier with the chrome cylinders idea.
Yeah. Drapery and lighting, as we said. Yeah. I would say, I mean, a lot of it is just learning those like 7 key folds is going to be kind of your number one start to understand how to just invent a basic fold, just like inventing the cylinders, starting at the very bottom. And then once you feel like you can do those pretty well, it'd be studying how they go over forms, so like just studying normal drapery, and then from there, a lot of it is just, at least if I was inventing, drapery on a character or something for like one of those inks I was talking about that I do sometimes. A lot of the time, it's just finding reference of similar clothing that I want to draw, and then basically drawing out the shapes and then understanding how generally the folds work and stealing folds from different images. So like, you know, if you find 5 different images, you'll be like, oh, I like that fold and that fold. And then, yeah, most of the time that's how I would do that sort of thing. And then really when it comes to inventing lighting, it's just drawing a lot of simple stuff like this in the sense of it's simple lighting. So drawing something that you do over and over. So you can draw, you know, a cylinder or a slightly more complex cylinder or a knee and the cylinder of the leg from imagination. And then so you understand the basic principles of lighting, but then you do still have to apply that to in a more complicated way. So if you have satin or something, it's like the highlights are going to be shinier and they're going to have harder edges. So it does get very complicated, but essentially it always comes down to break it down to the simplest thing that you can memorize and then keep building up from there, and really just try to understand it all.
Inventing lighting on textures is too advanced.
And that's why, like, if you want it to be really realistic, most of the time you need to find some kind of reference, because you can invent it to a degree, but unless you've drawn whatever it is a extreme amount, like you've drawn it all the time, then most of the time you need reference. Yeah, is what I've found.
Something really helpful I heard Lucas say when he was still teaching here was that for all his like rendering dragons and everything that he does, he said, yeah, I just learned how to render the figure. And then that basically solved most of those problems.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly helpful, and especially because it's so difficult that, you know, if you render a vase or something, you can mess up proportionally. You can do all sorts of things that you just can't get away with when rendering the figure, and so you put yourself in sort of a more constrained space where you have to do it correctly, and you get better and better at it, and then most other things are actually easier to try to render in the end. But getting pretty close here to the end of this drawing, really just kind of trying to shore everything up. Again, I talked a lot about losing this arm, and I've kind of gone back and forth on how much I want to lose. And so I'm just going back in there and sort of giving it a little bit more information, because I don't want it to be too simple when other areas like this arm are very complex. So it's usually finding that balance of, I want variation, but not too much variation where it's supposed to break apart. Always a hard balance. And sort of just going back, bringing together some shadow shapes, kind of softening edges, simplifying down a lot of the darks, so that the light areas really shine through as important. And I'm just using some vine charcoal because it really blends easy. So I can kind of blend areas together. But it does sort of wash away with your hands, so you have to be careful not to use it too much or to use it in too dark of areas, I really would say, because it just lightens every time your hand touches it. But I like this way of drawing a lot, even at the end like this, with a piece of vine, because it sort of feels like painting to me, where I can sort of cut in and decide how wide that leg is going to be, just like how I would if I was painting it. You know, maybe you'd soften it out and then cut in again, get that sort of sergeant edge or Sorolla. You know, they do that sort of thing. You can see too, I'm trying to keep the drapery pretty simple. I just want it to be sort of graphic, interesting, and not take too much attention. It's really easy to get try to refine the drapery and then get way too much information in there and make it really, really interesting. And your eye just goes straight to that. A lot of times I'm adding in basically what you call like visual noise, or just sort of interest in areas that aren't that interesting. But again, it's all about balance, so not making it too interesting, trying to get just that right amount. Sometimes I'll just pull some sort of like subtle through lines, just through things to, again, break up edges. It's more designerly thing. And it's definitely easy to overdo it, but I do like it. There are still areas I could definitely go back and fix up and get more refined with, but as an overall statement, I'm pretty happy with this drawing. And just like I was saying before, it's a 3-hour drawing, so I'm not aiming for perfection. I'm aiming for something that looks nice, that reads well. I'm looking for something sort of gestural and painterly in this drawing, and just to always be getting better at the same things we talked about, of getting better at understanding the forms, learning how to use values, and oftentimes, not necessarily thinking of this as, oh, this just has to be a great drawing, but it's just a learning opportunity, because there's so much to always be getting better at and learning, trying to understand and push yourself. So I'm pretty much gonna call it probably right about here, and I don't know if you have any other last announcements, Trav, but
Only last announcement I'd say is watch out for the Watts on Bridgman coming out next week on the 15th. And yeah, that would be pretty much it. So other than that, I'll just leave it to you to sign things off.
yeah, well, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this little demonstration. Will we be doing more of these somewhat in the future?
We'll have one a month.
Yeah, one a month. So
It's either me or Eric will be next.
awesome. Yeah, so feel free to check in within around a month. I'm sure if you check on the Watts Instagram, you can find us there. You can also find my Instagram, Evan Collene Art, if you want to check out some of mine. I think if you go to the Watts Instagram, you can find mine as well. But again, I hope you guys have enjoyed. I know I loved watching these, and it's always fun to sort of see someone's process and get into their mind a bit. So I hope you guys have